Today we're diving into the secrets that only 1% of the population truly understands. We're about to embark on a journey of self-discovery and transformation that will reshape the way you think, feel, and live. Now, I want you to imagine waking up every morning with a sense of purpose, joy, and abundance. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, what if I told you that the key to unlocking this extraordinary life lies within your own mind? That's right, within your thoughts, emotions, and actions. You see, as you wake up each morning, most people tend to immediately dive into the ocean of their problems. The moment you open your eyes, your brain kicks in, recalling memories, experiences, and emotions from the past. And here's the kicker. These memories are like circuits wired in your brain, influencing how you think and feel in the present. So how can you create a different reality when you're anchored in the past? It's all about breaking free from the familiar past, which, if left unchecked, becomes a predictable future. Your thoughts and emotions shape your state of being, and if you're constantly dwelling on past problems, guess what? You're bound to create the same life over and over again. Now let's talk about the morning routine. Ever notice how it feels like you're living on autopilot? Checking your phone, scrolling through messages, posting on social media? It's all part of a programmed routine. Your brain becomes a record stuck on repeat, and before you know it, you've lost your free will to a program. But wait, there's good news. You have the power to break free from this cycle, and it starts with becoming aware of your unconscious habits and routines. It's time to take the reins of your life and stop being a passenger in your own existence. By the time you hit 35, a whopping 95% of who you are is a set of ingrained behaviors, emotional reactions, and unconscious habits. Think of it like a computer program running in the background of your mind. Now, most people only attempt to change when faced with crisis or trauma. But I'm here to tell you, why wait for the storm to hit when you can sail toward a brighter future right now? So you might be wondering, how do we break free from this subconscious program? Well, my friend, that's where meditation comes into play. By slowing down your brainwaves, you can access the operating system where real change can occur. Through practice, you can teach your brain to wire in new patterns, opening the door to a world of possibilities. Let's break down this idea about choosing joy and inspiration as the catalyst for change. It's like deciding to have a superhero cape made out of positive vibes instead of waiting for a storm to whisk you away. So, you know how many folks tend to wait for things to get really tough before deciding to make a change? It's like saying, I'll fix the leaky roof when it's pouring rain. But here's the cool twist. You don't have to wait for a thunderstorm to start making improvements in your life. You can actually choose joy and inspiration to be your companions on this journey of transformation. Picture this. Imagine if you could decide to change things in your life because you're feeling joyful and inspired, not because everything is falling apart. It's like setting sail on a ship called change, not because you're trying to escape a sinking boat, but because you're excited about the adventure that lies ahead. Now, most people think change only happens when things are really tough, when there's pain, suffering, or tragedy. But guess what? You can flip the script. You can be the director of your own life movie and choose joy and inspiration as the leading actors. The cool thing is, more and more people are starting to catch on to this idea. It's like a light bulb moment. Realizing that you don't have to spend the majority of your life stuck in survival mode, always expecting the worst to happen. You don't need to live with a rain cloud over your head, waiting for a lightning strike to make you move. Imagine waking up in the morning and thinking, today is a new day and I'm going to make positive changes because I'm inspired to do so. I'm choosing joy over fear and I'm excited about what lies ahead. It's like turning the dial from the "Oh no, not again" channel to the "Let's make today amazing" channel. Choosing joy and inspiration as the drivers of change is like giving your life a major upgrade. It's saying, I want to grow, learn, and become a better version of myself, not because I have to, but because I can't wait to see the awesome person I can become. Think of it this way. If change were a road trip, most people wait until their car breaks down to start fixing it. But what if you decided to take that road trip in a brand new shiny car because you wanted to explore new places and enjoy the journey? That's what choosing joy and inspiration as your catalyst for change is all about. And here's the secret sauce. When you decide to make changes from a place of joy and inspiration, it's like setting off a chain reaction. Your positive energy starts attracting more positivity. It's like being a magnet for good vibes. You create a ripple effect of joy, and those around you might catch the joy bug too. So why not be a trendsetter in your own life? Choose joy and inspiration as your companions on this adventure of change. You don't have to wait for a wake-up call in the form of pain or suffering. Instead, wake up every morning with a sense of excitement about the positive changes you can make. The unknown can be a scary place for many. People often fear what they can't predict. But here's a truth bomb for you. The best way to predict your future is to create it, not from the known, but from the unknown. What thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? What actions do you want to manifest in your day? The unknown holds the potential for endless possibilities. Let's talk about mental rehearsal. The brain doesn't distinguish between what's imagined and what's real. Close your eyes and mentally rehearse the actions and reactions of the future you desire. See yourself living that life. Feel the emotions as if you're already there. This primes your brain to believe it's happening, shifting from a record of the past to a map of the future. But here's the challenging part: teaching your body what the future will feel like ahead of the actual experience. You can't wait for success to feel empowered or for wealth to feel abundant. You must condition your body to a new mind. So here's a step-by-step guide to making those changes. Take time out of your busy life to disconnect. Turn off your phone, TV, and computer. Sit down, close your eyes, and center yourself. Focus on your breath. Centering yourself in the present moment gives you the energy to create. Ask yourself, can I be defined by a vision of the future instead of memories of the past? Contemplate and answer. As you do, you're changing your brain. Decide on the emotions you'll feel in your future. Teach your body what that future feels like, and don't get up until you feel those emotions. Mentally rehearse who you'll be when you open your eyes. Review the actions, choices, and steps you'll take. Decide what thoughts, behaviors, and habits from your past need to change. Be conscious of them to avoid slipping back into old patterns. Determine which emotions no longer belong in your future. Condition your body to a new mind. Now do this every single day and watch as your personality creates your personal reality. Your personality is a combination of how you think, act, and feel. Change any one of those elements and you change your life. Be at the cause, not the effect. So my friends, there's incredible power within you to shape the life you desire. The journey begins by acknowledging the potential for change. Invest in yourself and you invest in your future. Take the time to disconnect, center yourself, and define the future you want to create. The best way to predict your future is to create it. Choose to live in the unknown, embrace the uncertainty, and let go of the limitations holding you back. You have the ability to rewrite your story, and the time to start is now. Everything in this physical world, and then there's energy, and that energy has a consciousness, it has an awareness, and that energy is a field of information that we are an extension of, that we have access to, and that we spend so much of our life looking outside of ourselves instead of looking inside of ourselves, and that we are really conditioned to look just for particles and matter instead of energy and information. And truly, when people reach the end of their beliefs, or they're facing crisis in their life, that's the moment they start to turn within and start to ask the bigger questions. And if you were astute enough to look at this in moments of contemplation, if you were wanting to hide God anywhere, it would be a good place to hide. It would be within the human being, because everybody's looking outside of themselves, and we look for reasons to change and regulate our emotional states. You know, we think that things and people and external things will really fulfill emotions that we're trying to change within us, and that truly when we start to really investigate who we are and look to see how we do that and demystify it. I think once we start to demystify it, it can become a skill. And so Einstein was a super cool guy because he spent a lot of time inward, and at 12 years old, he asked himself this simple question: if I ride my bicycle at the speed of light and I turn my lamp on, I turn my headlight on, will it go on? So he thought about that question every single day of his life, every day of his life. He would go out in a boat on a lake as a child and lay on his back in the boat and look up at the sky and think about this. And he was building models of understanding. He was working his best to be able to figure out how light and energy were related. He did it for 10 years. He was possessed by the concept. And finally, he was working as a third-rate clerk in a Swiss patent office, and he was watching this man fix the roof across the way. And he just paused for a moment, and he was watching him. And the moment he was watching him, he got this incredible vision, and he understood how light and energy were related. It was a very abstract vision, and it was so abstract and so dimensional that he had to go back to school to learn the mathematics to be able to explain what he saw. And his wife, his first wife, was an amazing scientist, and she helped him with a lot of the mathematics. And so when Einstein began to figure it out, he narrowed it down to that one simple equation that E equals mc squared, energy and matter related, and the currency converter is the speed of light. And so it became very interesting because when Einstein published his papers on relativity, he didn't say like, hey, this person said this and this person said this, and I'm going to footnote this person. He just said, ladies and gentlemen, this is how it is. And it rocked the scientific community because he didn't really need anybody else as a reference. He had a discovery, and his discovery was so unique, and his brain really was wired for the understanding of light. And light was the ceiling of this reality. And so Einstein and Planck started doing these really interesting experiments where they were taking energy and they were putting energetic impulses into metals. And what they were looking to see is if electrons behave the same way as the very large. In other words, when an apple falls from the tree, it falls in a very specific way. It falls towards the center. It falls towards the larger body. So he reasoned, well, if we disturb electrons, and him and Planck were doing these experiments, if we disturb these electrons, then they should fall just like an apple falling from the tree towards the nucleus. It should be predictable, just like it's predictable in Newtonian physics and classical physics. Well, when they started disturbing the electrons, something very unusual happened. The electron gained energy, then it lost energy, and it gained energy, and it lost energy, and it gained energy, and it lost energy. And instead of it falling like a ball rolling down a hill, it was like a ball rolling down steps. All of a sudden, they became very aware that the subatomic world, the very tiny, didn't behave like the very large world. And so then they started to look for the electron. They started to try to measure it. And everywhere they looked for it, it appeared. And when they turned their back on it and they no longer looked to measure it, it went from a particle that collapsed, called collapsing the wave function, back into energy. Now, this was a revolutionary moment because this meant that subjective mind, your mind has an effect on the objective world. That mind and matter are somehow correlated. And truly, when people reach the end of their beliefs or they're facing crisis in their life, that's the moment they start to turn within and start to ask the bigger questions. And if you were astute enough to look at this in moments of contemplation, if you were wanting to hide God anywhere, it would be a good place to hide. It would be within the human being because everybody's looking outside of themselves, and we look for reasons to change and regulate our emotional states. We think that things and people and external things will really fulfill emotions that we're trying to change within us. And that truly, when we start to really investigate who we are and look to see how we do that and demystify it, I think once we start to demystify it, it can become a skill. And so Einstein was a super cool guy because he spent a lot of time inward, and at 12 years old, he asked himself this simple question: if I ride my bicycle at the speed of light, and I turn my lamp on, I turn my headlight on, will it go on? So he thought about that question every single day of his life, every day of his life. He would go out in a boat on a lake as a child and lay on his back in the boat and look up at the sky and think about this. And he was building models of understanding. He was working his best to be able to figure out how light and energy were related. He did it for 10 years. He was possessed by the concept. And finally, he was working as a third-rate clerk in a Swiss patent office, and he was watching this man fix the roof across the way. And he just paused for a moment, and he was watching him. And the moment he was watching him, he got this incredible vision, and he understood how light and energy were related. It was a very abstract vision. And it was so abstract and so dimensional that he had to go back to school to learn the mathematics, to be able to explain what he saw. And his wife, his first wife, was an amazing scientist, and she helped him with a lot of the mathematics. And so when Einstein began to figure it out, he narrowed it down to that one simple equation that E equals mc squared, energy and matter related, and the currency converter is the speed of light. And so it became very interesting because when Einstein published his papers on relativity, he didn't say like, hey, this person said this and this person said this, and I'm going to footnote this person. He just said, ladies and gentlemen, this is how it is. And it rocked the scientific community because he didn't really need anybody else as a reference. He had a discovery, and his discovery was so unique, and his brain really was wired for the understanding of light. And light was the ceiling of this reality. And so Einstein and Planck started doing these really interesting experiments where they were taking energy and they were putting energetic impulses into metals. And what they were looking to see is if electrons behave the same way as the very large. In other words, when an apple falls from the tree, it falls in a very specific way. It falls towards the center. It falls towards the larger body. So he reasoned, well, if we disturb electrons, and him and Planck were doing these experiments, if we disturb these electrons, then they should fall just like an apple falling from the tree towards the nucleus. It should be predictable, just like it's predictable in Newtonian physics and classical physics. Well, when they started disturbing the electrons, something very unusual happened. The electron gained energy, then it lost energy. And it gained energy, and it lost energy. And it gained energy, and it lost energy. And instead of it falling like a ball rolling down a hill, it was like a ball rolling down steps. All of a sudden, they became very aware that the subatomic world, the very tiny, didn't behave like the very large world. And so then they started to look for the electron. They started to try to measure it. And everywhere they looked for it, it appeared. And when they turned their back on it and they no longer looked to measure it, it went from a particle that collapsed, called collapsing the wave function, back into energy. Now, this was a revolutionary moment because this meant that subjective mind, your mind has an effect on the objective world. That mind and matter are somehow correlated. And so this birth of quantum physics came along. And this quantum physics experiment say that you cannot do a quantum physics experiment without an observer around. In other words, a mind always has to be present because it will influence the outcome. You with me? So now that invisible field of spirit, that invisible field of information and energy, somehow you as an individual can influence the nature of reality with your mind. The same experiences produce the same emotions. Those same emotions tend to influence the way we think. And our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, and even our gene expression is equal to how we think, how we act, and how we feel. And how you think, how you act, and how you feel is called your personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. So then it makes sense then, if you want to create a new personal reality, a new life, you're going to have to change your personality. And you've got to start thinking about what you've been thinking about and change it. You've got to become aware of your unconscious habits and behaviors, even how you speak. Then you have to look at the emotions that you live by every single day and decide, do these emotions belong in my future? So many people try to create a new life as the same person. In order to create a new personal reality, you've got to change your personality. So the principle in neuroscience says that nerve cells that fire together, wire together, thinking the same way, making the same choices, demonstrating the same actions, creating the same experiences that stamp the same networks of neurons into the same patterns, all for the familiar feeling called you. And you do that for 10 years in a row, you're going to hardwire your brain into a very finite signature because you're firing and wiring that way. And that box in the brain, that becomes our personality, becomes our identity. And by the time we're 35 years old, for the most part, we've done something so many times that the body now knows how to do it as well as the mind. And that's a habit. So we have these unconscious programs of behaviors, automatic habits, redundant emotional reactions, hardwired beliefs, perceptions, attitudes that function just like a computer program. You press go and it runs automatically. So then when it comes time to change, thinking positively is going to do nothing because your body has been conditioned for the most part into a program in the past. So the thought never makes it to the body because the body's on a different program. So how do we begin to influence the body so that the thought actually produces some type of change? So think about it. If you think an unhappy thought, you're going to feel unhappy. If you think you're a failure, you're going to feel like a failure. Once you feel like a failure, you're going to think you're a failure. And people get caught in these loops of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking. And that redundancy is a conditioning process because all you need is an image or a picture or a thought and a feeling, a response, stimulus response. And so the people tend to condition their brain and body into the past. And so when it comes time to change, you got to leave that familiar territory. And any choice that you make, if you said, hey, I'm going to eat a better diet, I'm going to wake up early and work out, I'm going to do meditation, the moment you decide to do something differently, get ready because it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty. You're not going to be able to predict the next moment. That means you've left your known biology and you're stepping into the unknown. Now, theoretically, that sounds great, but if the body has been conditioned into a familiar feeling, it's in the known. The moment you take it outside the familiarity, it wants to go back to where it's comfortable. So the body starts influencing the mind. And this is where people say, I want you to start your diet tomorrow. Oh, why don't you start working out this evening? You're really never going to change. You're too tired. You have a headache. This doesn't feel right. And this is where people talk themselves out of it. Because if they respond to that thought leads to the same choice, which leads to the same behavior, creates the same experience, produces the same feeling, and then they say, this feels right. No, that feels familiar. So going from one state of mind and body to another state of mind and body, you gotta cross a river. And the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. Now, once people understand that they're going to be uncomfortable, then the question is, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? What behaviors will you demonstrate in one day? And the act of closing your eyes and rehearsing who you're going to be when you open your eyes begins to install neurological hardware in your brain to look like you've already done it. Now, intention is a vision, a potential that already exists in the quantum field that you get to select. And when you ask yourself a question like, what would it be like to be healthy? What would it be like to be wealthy? What would it be like to be free or to be in love? The moment you ask that creative question, a part of your brain called the frontal lobe turns on. That's the crowning achievement of the human being. Once that area of the brain turns on, it's like a great symphony leader. It looks out of the landscape of the entire brain and it begins to randomly select different networks of neurons that are connected to the things you've learned in your life or the experiences you've had. And it begins to seamlessly paste them together to create an ideal, a vision, or an internal representation. That is a potential experience that's awaiting you. But it's not enough to just have the mind involved. Thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. Once you can begin to emotionally embrace that future reality before it's made manifest, when you combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, the freedom, the joy, the inspiration, the genuine love that you feel or gratitude from that experience, the moment you do that, your body as the unconscious mind begins to believe it's living in that future reality in the present moment. Now you're moving into a new state of being, into a new personality, and a new personality creates a new personal reality. The research that we've done shows that when we teach people how to regulate their internal states, to begin to create more coherence in their brain, and to generate elevated emotions like joy and gratitude and inspiration, that not only does the brain become coherent, but so does the heart. And when the brain is coherent, the heart is coherent. When the heart is coherent, the brain is coherent. And so why don't we live by these states on a daily basis? Primarily because the majority of the time that we live in our waking state of consciousness, 70% of the time, you and I are living by the hormones of stress. And living in stress is living in survival. And when you're living in survival, the very chemicals of survival cause you to function as materialist, defining your reality with your senses. You pay attention to objects and things and people. You begin to believe that your outer world is more real than your inner world. And the side effect of this over time begins to cause us to feel separate from possibility. Why? Because when you're threatened by some predator or some danger in your life, it's not a time to go in. It's not a time to trust the unknown. It's not a time to open your heart and feel love. It's not a time to communicate. It's not a time to create. It's not a time to learn. It's a time to survive. So then, in order for us to create, we have to lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want for something greater to occur. And most importantly, we want you to understand when you're in the creative state and when you're not. And if you were to take a little time every day and apply some of the principles in changing beliefs and perceptions about yourself and your life, and what is a belief other than a thought you keep thinking over and over again? And all beliefs are based on past experiences. And in order for you to change a belief or perception about yourself and your life, you have to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional conditioning in your body, and your body literally has to respond to a new mind. And when the choice becomes an experience that you never forget, that's the moment the past biologically no longer exists in you. People use the word victim so much, and I don't really think we spend a lot of time really unraveling the idea. But if I said to you, Jay, how are you doing today? And you said, well, I'm really upset because of this person or this circumstance or this condition in my life, then what we're saying, this is not conscious, this is an unconscious program. What we're saying is somebody out there is actually controlling the way I'm feeling and the way that I'm thinking. So if something out there is controlling your feelings and your thoughts, you're victim to whoever, whatever that is. Now here's the challenge. The challenge is when things go really well, then you are feeling really good. But when things aren't going very well, then you're feeling pretty bad. You begin to become conscious of your unconscious actions or habits or behaviors and modify them. And then we have to begin to look at the emotions that we live by every single day that keep us connected to the past and decide, do these emotions belong in our future? So most people are trying to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. You literally have to become someone else. And can you select a new possibility in the quantum field and begin to emotionally embrace that future every single day to such a degree that your body, as the unconscious mind, the objective mind, does not know the difference between the experience in your life that's creating the emotion and the emotion that you're fabricating by thought alone, to the degree that you begin to signal new genes and new ways to change your body to look like the experience has already happened. Now, the latest research in epigenetics says it's absolutely possible. This every day, installing the circuitry every day, conditioning the body into the emotion of the future, that your body begins to change to look like it's already happened. Now this is where it gets fun, because now you no longer have to go anywhere to get it. If you think that your thoughts have something to do with your future, just from a theoretical standpoint, that your thoughts create your destiny, and you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, well, then your life isn't going to change very much as long as you're thinking the same way. If you're not being defined by a vision of the future, then you're left with the memories of the past. Is it possible then that the way you think and the way you feel can begin to produce effects in your outer world? Now, that isn't something that you swallow in one bite. It's a process of gaining knowledge. It's a process of practice. It's a process of experience. But once you start seeing those synchronicities, those coincidences, those opportunities, that start to fall into place because you're experiencing change in your outer world. If you're doing the work, you're going to start paying attention to what you're doing inside of you that's producing the effect outside of you. And once you correlate the changes of what you're doing inside of you with the effect you produce outside of you, you're going to pay attention to what you did, and you're going to do it again. And all of a sudden, you're going to start believing more that you're the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life. And those same thoughts lead to the same choices. The same choices lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors create the exact same experiences, and we anticipate the same feelings or emotions from those experiences.